My mother kicked me out at 16 for her twins. Now she returns 15 years later, demanding I pay for their college. But I got a restraining order she never saw coming. I'm 31 years old. I work in real estate, and I think the time has finally come to tell this whole story because there are still days when I wake up and can't believe all of this actually happened. The thing is, my mom basically kicked me out of the house when I was 16, and after more than a decade of not talking to me, she decided it was the perfect time to reappear and ask me for money. But, well, I guess I should start from the beginning. So all of this makes sense. My mom had me when she was 20, and my biological father, that man doesn't even deserve that title, took off as soon as he found out about the pregnancy. I literally never met him. I don't even have a picture of him, nothing. So, basically, I grew up as an only child, with my mom and my maternal grandparents, who lived like 3 blocks away from us and were practically my second parents. And don't get me wrong, my childhood wasn't terrible or anything like that. My mom worked a lot, like 2 jobs sometimes, but there was always food on the table and a roof over our heads. My grandparents picked me up from school, helped me with homework, went to all my baseball games, those things. The truth is, I thought we had a pretty normal life for a single-parent household. Things started to change when I was like 8 years old, I think, or maybe I was 9. I'm not completely sure. My mom met Derek at her job. He was a supervisor or something like that at the warehouse where she worked. At first he seemed like a decent guy, honestly. He'd take me to the movies, play video games with me, buy me stuff. I remember thinking, okay, this having a father figure thing isn't so bad. They got married when I was 12. It was a small wedding in my grandparents' backyard. Nothing fancy, but it was nice. My grandparents weren't super convinced about Derek. Looking back, I can see the looks they'd give each other when he'd say certain things, but they never said anything directly negative in front of me. The first few years with Derek were, let's say, normal. He wasn't my best friend or anything, but he wasn't bad to me either. We were like roommates who got along okay. You know what I mean? He worked. My mom worked. I went to school and did my thing. Everything was predictable and calm, basically. But then, when I was finishing up being 16, like November or December of that year, my mom sat Derek and me down in the living room and announced she was pregnant. And not just pregnant with one baby, no, pregnant with twins. Derek was super excited, like jumping all over the house, calling all his friends and family. I was going to have siblings? I guess that was fine, but I was also 16 and was more worried about getting my driver's license and not failing chemistry. What happened next still seems surreal to me when I think about it. Like a month after the pregnancy announcement, my mom and Derek sat me down again in the same living room, and this time, there was no excitement on their faces. My mom had that expression she'd make when she was about to tell me something she knew I wasn't going to want to hear, like when she told me we couldn't buy the new console I wanted or something like that. Derek was standing there with his arms crossed, looking at the floor. And then my mom dropped the bomb. She told me that with the twins on the way, they weren't going to be able to support me too. That the money wasn't enough for 4 people, that the babies were going to need a lot of things, and that basically, I was going to have to leave. I sat there trying to process what I had just heard. Was she kicking me out? At 16, I asked her, where am I supposed to go? And she told me, very casually, as if she was suggesting I order pizza for dinner, that I could go live with my grandparents, that they had space, and that they'd always been involved in raising me anyway. Derek didn't say absolutely anything during this whole conversation. He just stood there nodding when my mom talked. I tried to reason with her. I told her I could get a part-time job, that I didn't eat that much anyway, that I could help with the babies when they were born. But she had already made the decision. She told me I had 2 weeks to pack my things and move in with my grandparents. I can't explain what it feels like for your own mother to tell you there's no longer room for you in her life. It was like everything we'd built over 16 years. All the times she told me she loved me, all the photos on the wall of the 2 of us. All of that suddenly meant nothing compared to these babies who hadn't even been born yet. I went to my room that night and cried. But like that silent crying where you try not to let anyone hear you because you don't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they destroyed you. The next 2 weeks were the most awkward of my life. My mom acted like nothing weird was happening, like she hadn't just told me to get out of her house. Derek completely avoided me. I think he knew what they were doing was wrong, but didn't have the guts to admit it. I called my grandparents crying one night and told them everything. And they didn't even hesitate. They told me, of course I could come live with them, that their house had always been my house too. My grandmother was furious with my mom. I could hear her in the background telling my grandfather, how was it possible that her daughter was doing this? When moving day came, I packed everything I could into trash bags and old boxes. My mom didn't help me. She was in her room resting because the pregnancy had her tired, according to her. Derek carried some of my boxes to my grandfather's car, but didn't say a single word, not even goodbye. And that's how I ended up living with my grandparents at 16. Not because they rescued me from an abusive situation or anything dramatic like that, but because my mom literally decided her new children were more important than the child she already had. Living with my grandparents was different, but not bad. They were older, obviously. My grandmother was like 65 and my grandfather 68, but they adapted to having a teenager in the house again. My grandmother made me breakfast every morning. My grandfather taught me how to change the car's oil and fix things around the house. They never talked bad about my mom in front of me, although I know they were disappointed in her. I finished high school living with them, worked at a supermarket on weekends to have my own money because I didn't want to be more of a financial burden. My grandparents told me it wasn't necessary, that they could give me what I needed, but I felt I needed to prove I could fend for myself after basically being told I was an expense they couldn't afford. During all this time, my mom didn't contact me even once. Not for my 17th birthday. Not when I graduated high school. Nothing. The twins were born when I had just turned 16. A girl and a boy. I saw the photos on Facebook because, yeah, I still had them added, even though we didn't talk. They looked like any other babies, honestly. Wrinkled and red. My mom looked happy in the photos. Derek, too. It was like they had gotten the perfect family they always wanted, and I just didn't fit into that picture. Part of me wanted to go to the hospital when they were born, but the other part, the part that was hurt and angry, told me that if they didn't care about having me in their lives, then I wasn't going to make the effort either. When it was time for college, I applied for every scholarship I could find. My aunt on my mom's side, her younger sister, was the one who helped me navigate the whole student loan process. She even co-signed some of my loans because my grandparents were already retired and didn't qualify as co-signers. My aunt was just as upset as my grandparents about the whole situation. She told me she had tried to talk to my mom to make her see reason, but that my mom got super defensive and told her to mind her own business. So basically my mom's whole family was on my side, which made me feel validated but also more confused about how my own mother could do what she did. College was tough but good. I studied business administration, not because I was particularly passionate about it, but because it seemed like something practical that would get me a job after graduating. I lived in the dorms, worked at the campus library, and basically survived on instant noodles and whatever I could get for free at university events. My grandparents visited me once a month, always bringing homemade food my grandmother had prepared and some extra money that at first I didn't want to accept, but eventually did, because I literally had no choice. During all these years, 4 full years of college, my mom still didn't contact me. Not a text message, not an email, absolutely nothing. It was like I had stopped existing for her the day I left her house. I graduated at 22, got an XCO, entry-level job at a real estate company doing basically administrative work. The salary was bad. I lived in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates I didn't know, and I was paying my student loans while trying to survive on what was left. But it was my life, you know? I had built it myself, without help from my mom, and there was something proud about that even though it was difficult. Years passed, and I climbed the ranks. At 25, I got promoted to agent assistant. At 27, I got my license and became an actual agent. And at 29, I was making pretty good money. Not rich or anything, but definitely comfortable. I was able to move into my own 1-bedroom apartment, no roommates, and I started saving money for the first time in my life. And then, just when I thought my life was finally in a good place, like 2 years ago, my mom decided it was the perfect time to reappear. She didn't call me or send me a message first. No. She just showed up at my apartment door on a Saturday afternoon. I opened the door and there she was. She looked older, obviously, with more gray hair and wrinkles around her eyes. I froze. I literally didn't know what to say. She tried to hug me and I instinctively took a step back. She said, "Hi, honey. Long time no see," as if we had stopped seeing each other because I had moved to another state for college and not because she had kicked me out of her house more than a decade earlier. I asked her what she was doing there, how she had gotten my address. She told me my aunt had given her the information, that she had told her I was doing well and was successful. Right there, I knew why she had come. She tried to make small talk first, asking me about my work, my life, if I had a girlfriend. I answered with monosyllables because honestly, I didn't want to be having this conversation. Eventually, she got to the point of her visit. The twins, who were now like 13 or 14, were going to go to college in a few years, and she and Derek didn't have money saved for that. She told me she had heard I was making good money, and that maybe I could help with the twins' college costs. Basically, she wanted me, the son she had abandoned because supposedly she couldn't support 4 people, to pay for college for the children she did decide to keep. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a bitter and sarcastic laugh. I asked her if she was serious. She said yes, that they were my brother and sister, and that family helps each other. I told her it was interesting that she now believed in family helping each other when she literally kicked me out at 16 because she couldn't support me. She tried to justify herself, saying it was different, that at that time things were difficult, that Derek and she were going through financial problems. I told her I also went through financial problems, that I ate instant noodles for 4 years straight, that I had to work and study at the same time while other students could focus only on studying because their parents supported. She said I was being dramatic, that I clearly had come out fine from all of that I had a good job and a good apartment. I told her to leave. I literally said, "Get out of my house and don't come back." She started crying, told me I was being cruel, that the twins weren't to blame for any of this. And she was right about that. The twins weren't to blame, but it also wasn't my responsibility to fix the consequences of the decisions she and Derek made. I told her that if they had been worried about the twins' college costs, maybe they shouldn't have kicked out their other son to be able to have them. I closed the door while she was still standing there crying in the hallway. I felt bad for a second, but then I remembered all the times I had cried because she abandoned me, and that feeling of guilt evaporated pretty quickly. I thought that would be it, that she'd get the hint and leave me alone. I was so wrong. She started sending me emails, like 3 or 4 a week. The first ones were sad and pleading, saying she needed me to understand her position, that she just wanted the best for all her children. When I didn't respond to any of those, the emails became more aggressive. She told me I was an ungrateful son, that after everything she had sacrificed to raise me, I couldn't do this small favor for my family. Then she started calling me, leaving long voicemails where she alternated between crying and yelling at me. I blocked her number after like the 10th call, but then she started calling from other numbers, from Derek's phone, from numbers I didn't recognize. Things escalated when she showed up at my work. I work in a real estate office that's pretty professional, with a receptionist and everything. My mom showed up on a Tuesday afternoon when I was in a meeting with a potential client and started making a scene in the lobby. The receptionist sent me a message saying there was an emergency at the front desk. I left the meeting apologizing to my client, and there was my mom yelling that I was selfish and that I was abandoning my family. My boss heard all the commotion and came out of his office. It was humiliating. I told my mom to leave or I was going to call security. She yelled at me, "Go ahead. Call security. Show everyone what kind of son you are." I had to ask the building security guard to escort her out. He ended up calling the police because she refused to leave. The cops arrived and talked to her outside. I was inside giving my boss explanations about what had just happened. I had to tell him the whole story, about how she kicked me out when I was 16 and how now she wanted money. My boss was understanding, told me to take the rest of the day off. But I was mortified. I had worked so hard to build a professional reputation in that office, and my mom had come and made a circus in front of everyone. The client I was meeting with eventually decided to go with another agent. I don't blame him. Who would want to work with someone who has that kind of family drama? After the incident at my work, I thought maybe now she would stop. She told me she was going to tell the whole family what kind of person I was, that she was going to ruin my reputation. Some emails were from Derek, too, telling me he was disappointed in me, that a real man would help his family. It was surreal to receive these messages from the guy who was completely okay with kicking me out when I was 16, and now was telling me how I should behave. My mom started showing up at my apartment at random hours. She'd knock on the door for hours, yell my name from the hallway. My neighbors started complaining to the building management. One of my neighbors, an older guy who lived in the apartment next door, asked me if everything was okay because he had heard a woman yelling outside my door several times. I had to explain to him that it was my mother and that she had issues. I felt ridiculous. A man almost 30 years old, having to deal with harassment from his own mother. The last straw was like 6 months ago. I had gotten home from work. I was tired and just wanted to have dinner and watch Netflix. I heard knocking on the door. I thought it was my neighbor because sometimes we'd lend each other things. I opened without looking through the peephole first, and there was my mom. Before I could close the door, she pushed it and forced her way in. She started yelling at me right there in my living room, saying I was a disgrace. That how could I sleep at night knowing my siblings were going to have to go into debt to go to college when I had the money to help them? I told her to leave, that she was invading my property. She completely ignored me and kept yelling. I tried to guide her toward the door physically, without hurting her or anything, just like taking her by the arm to direct her to the exit, and then she hit me. She slapped me in the face, and then started pushing me and hitting me in the chest. I'm in total shock. She had never been violent with me before. My neighbor heard all the commotion and called the police. By the time they arrived, my mom was still yelling, and I had a scratch on my face where her nails had scratched me. The cops talked to both of us, to my neighbor who had witnessed part of the altercation from the hallway, and finally arrested my mom for assault and trespassing. Seeing my mom handcuffed and being put into the police car was surreal. Part of me felt sorry for her, but the other part, the bigger part, felt relief. Finally, there was something I could do, legally, to stop her. The next day, I went to court and requested a restraining order. I told the judge the whole story, from her kicking me out at 16 to the constant harassment and the assault incident. My neighbor came as a witness. My boss gave a written statement about the incident at my work. The judge approved the restraining order without much deliberation. My mom couldn't come within 500 feet of me, my apartment, or my work. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I haven't heard from her directly, although my grandparents told me she was calling them crying, saying I had gotten her arrested. My grandparents, God bless them, told her she had dug her own grave with her actions. My aunt also cut contact with her after finding out about everything that had happened. Apparently, my mom blamed her for giving me her address in the first place. The twins are now like 15, I imagine. I've never really met them, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will. It's not their fault, any of this, but I also don't feel any obligation toward them. I'm in the process of moving to a new apartment in a complex with better security, in a part of town where my mom doesn't know anyone. I haven't given my new address to anyone except my grandparents and my aunt, and I made them promise they wouldn't give it to anyone else under any circumstances. I changed my phone number too, created new email accounts. Basically, I'm starting from scratch. In terms of contact information, I know it sounds extreme, but after everything that happened, I need this peace of mind. I still go to therapy. I started like a year ago when all the harassment was at its worst. My therapist has helped me process a lot of the abandonment I felt when I was 16, and also manage the guilt I sometimes feel about not helping with the twins. Because yes, sometimes I do feel guilty. I wonder if I'm selfish for not helping 2 teenagers who are technically my family. But then I remember that I was also a teenager who needed help, and my mom decided I wasn't worth it. I remember all the nights I spent worrying about how I was going to pay for college, all the meals I skipped to save money, all the moments when I felt completely alone because the person who was supposed to love me unconditionally decided I was expendable. My grandparents are now over 75 years old. They're still in pretty good health, thank God. But I know they won't be here forever. They were more parents to me than my mom ever was, especially after 16. I see them every 2 weeks for dinner. I help them with things around the house they can't do themselves anymore. My grandmother still makes my favorite dish every time I go. And my grandfather and I watch baseball together in his living room, just like when I was a kid. They never make me feel like a burden. They never make me feel like they have to choose between me and someone else. And that difference between how they treat me and how my mom treated me shows me I made the right decision in maintaining the boundaries I established. The restraining order is valid for 1 year. After that, I have to renew it if I still need it. Honestly, I don't know what's going to happen when it expires. Part of me hopes my mom has learned her lesson and will leave me alone. Another part of me, the cynical part that has learned not to expect anything from her, knows she'll probably try to contact me again as soon as she legally can. If that happens, I guess I'll just renew the order and keep living my life. I don't owe her anything. I don't owe Derek anything. And while I feel sad for the twins, it's also not my responsibility to fix my parents' bad financial planning. Sometimes, I wonder how things would have been if my mom had never kicked me out. Would I have a relationship with the twins? Would we all be together at Christmas dinners like a normal family? But then I realize, probably not. A person who's capable of kicking out their teenage son probably isn't capable of building the kind of functional and loving family I imagine in those hypothetical scenarios. And honestly, I'm at peace with that. I have my grandparents, I have my aunt, I have good friends who have become my chosen family. I don't need someone in my life who only values me when they need something from me. Last week, a coworker asked me if I'm going to visit my family for Thanksgiving. I told him yes, that I was going to my grandparents. I didn't mention anything about my mom, or the twins, or this whole mess. It's easier that way, letting people assume I have a normal family. I don't need to explain to every person I meet why I don't talk to my mother. That's my story. It's part of who I am. But it doesn't completely define me. I'm more than the son who was abandoned. I'm someone who overcame that situation, who built a successful life despite the obstacles, who learned that self-love is more important than approval from someone who never valued you in the first place. And I guess that's enough for now.